Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are reading from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishna, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who first was the one who stayed behind and didn't go for pilgrimages and took care of the worship of Sri Ramakrishna after he passed away. And then later, Swami Vivekananda sent him to start the centers in the south of India. So he lectured there and worked there for many years before he passed away. So we're just reading snippets of things that he collected on the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, and then we'll move on to a couple of other shorter sections. All right, let's begin.
There are 5 classes of perfect men according to their inspirations as they get them either through dreams or by repeating certain symbolic words or by mere accident or through the grace of God or by their own inherent perfection. These men are the ornaments of the Mother Earth. When in the state of dream, a man hears some living words which enliven and illumine him, and thus makes him perfect, he is called the Svaprasiddha. When, by the repetition of certain holy symbolic words, fallen from the lips of his spiritual guide, a man attains perfection, he is called a Mantrasiddha. As a pauper suddenly becomes rich by getting some hidden treasure, so when a wicked man suddenly becomes good and perfect, he is called Hatha Siddha. As when a wealthy man, taking pity upon a poor, helpless wretch, dispels his poverty and dejection by enriching him through his beneficence, similarly, when the merciful Lord, taking pity upon an immoral and wicked man with satanic principles, makes him one of his best devotees, then that all-honored man God is known throughout the world as Kripa Siddha. As the pumpkin creeper brings forth the fruits first, arid, then the flowers, similarly when a man is perfect, even from his birth, and when having no duty to perform, he works merely for the good of mankind by becoming an exemplary character, he is called a Nitya Siddha.
Yeah, see, that's referring to if you've ever grown squash or pumpkins or gourds of that type, the baby little pumpkin or squash or whatever it is forms at the base of the flower before it opens, and then, of course, when it's pollinated, it develops into the pumpkin or the squash or whatever it is. So that's what it's referring to here. It's just more prominent than most plants. So that's interesting that there's so many different ways one can become a perfected soul. And of course, by perfected, he means that they've realized their own true nature. They've figured out that they are one with Brahman, that the Atman is one with Brahman. And it's interesting, sometimes people do get a sudden transformation through one of these ways, perhaps through a dream or through practicing with the mantra or receiving the mantra from an enlightened being and so forth. So it's nice to know that the Mother Earth has so many ways she can adorn herself with perfected souls. That was a nice metaphor to think of them as an ornament for Mother Earth. All right, let's read the last one in this section.
From a distance, a busy market appears to be full of noise and turmoils. But as one gets closer, everything there appears to be in perfect order, and bargaining and transactions seem to be carried on with nice precision. Similarly, shallow and superficial judgment cannot find any system in the infinite workings of the world, but when one dives deep into its mysteries, he finds there a well-ordered system moving on under the guidance of one infinitely intelligent power known as God.
That's a nice sentiment to keep in mind in these troubled times. We certainly do seem to live in a chaotic world with all sorts of difficulties, and difficult to understand all these strange workings of the world and why things have to go on the way they're going on. But according to this, there's some sort of a plan there. And we just haven't been able to see the bigger picture or dive deep enough to see the intimate workings of how this mysterious world works. And sometimes when things seem to be miserable and are for the worst, they turn out to actually be for the better in the long run. And so we simply have to assume that that's the case and keep our mind on holy things. That's the best we can do, and that's also shown to help things. Just having a lot of people that meditate and think nice spiritual thoughts uplifts the whole atmosphere of a community. And so one time someone was asking me, they were troubled by how to reconcile a contemplative life with a life of service when there's so many problems in the world. But that's the way to do it, you see. Even someone who is contemplative is doing a great service to the world by thinking all of those spiritual thoughts and producing that spiritual vibration. You don't have to be necessarily an activist that's out in the world in doing things in a political arena or social arena. We need people to do that, but if that's not your temperament, you just know that you're also being of great service by thinking high and lofty thoughts and meditating, because the people that are doing the service need that support. They need the support of holy vibrations and holy thoughts in order for them to carry out their work. And hopefully they are also doing at least a minimum amount of that to keep themselves on target, you could say, to sort of keep the rudder of their boat in line with the loftiest purposes. Otherwise, it's very easy for political and social reforms to get to extremes and actually not be very productive, but more destructive. So people often get swept up in that kind of arena if they don't have a firm moorings, you could say, in the spiritual realm. All right, we're going to skip over now to what's marked as chapter 3 on page 239 in this volume, number 1, and it's simply called, oh no, that's right, actually I told you the next one, didn't I? One God?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we might go back and do number 3 too, but since I told you one God, we'll do that. All right, so section 4. These are all very short.
One God. It is true that I am one from head to foot, but here I am called eyes. Here I'm called ears. Here I'm called feet. And although I am oneself, that which the feet can do, the eyes cannot do. What the eyes can do, the ears cannot do. And what the ears can do, the nose cannot do. Therefore, being one, yet I am many. It is one self that is manifesting itself as eyes, as nose, as feet, or hands. There is one self at the center, and all these are emanating from that center as radii. Similarly, although God is one, still he is manifesting himself in many forms. From the outside standpoint, he is one who has ramified himself into many. From the standpoint of the circumference, the radii are many. From the standpoint of the center, there is but one. This God is appearing both as one and many. Often when a man looks at one object, it seems to him to be several. And when one thus appears to be many, it means a deranged vision. So from the standpoint of truth, there is one. From the standpoint of falsehood, or Maya, there are many. A rope lies on the road, and one man mistakes it for a snake, another for a wisp of hay, the third for something else. The object remains one and the same. The ideas about it may be innumerable. In the same way, God is one, but the ideas about him are many.
That's a nice metaphor, and of course that metaphor is used in some of the scriptures as well, liking the different parts of a body to the different aspects of God, and also to the caste system. The caste system was also likened to that, where each caste represented a particular function of the God body, you could say. And so it recognized that they were all connected and all spiritual and all had their functions, but you didn't expect one to do the role of the other. But of course, if you take that too literally, then you get a very rigid caste system, which doesn't allow peoples to take on tasks for which they may be very suited. But anyway, the analogy is one that's very good. And I like that idea of the radii. If you look at the radii, at the center, they're all one. There's only one center, and all the radii start there. So every radii has that center point. And then at the other end of all the radii, they're all different. And so, again, that's a beautiful analogy for how there's one God, but it appears as many and serves many functions as well. And there was a funny scene in a sitcom when I was a little kid. I watched this sitcom, and this couple were stranded on a boat, but they had this emergency kit. And so they opened the emergency kit, and as he opens it up, he takes each piece out, and he has no idea what it's for, and he misidentifies every single piece and thinks it's useless and throws it overboard. And it's only until they take the next piece out of the kit that they realize what the connection was. And so that's another analogy. You have to know the whole picture in order to understand how things work together. And so don't be too fast to discard things or people thinking that they are not useful until you understand the whole picture and how they may all fit together. You know, you don't want, if you have a team, you don't want people to be all the same. You want them to all have different talents. That's, of course, a mark of a good politician. They get a cabinet not of yes men, but of people that have differences of opinion, so that they can hear all the different opinions from the cabinet members, so that they can then make a informed judgment, rather than simply having everybody agree with them and then going off on some tangent which might not have been very well thought out. So that's another good teaching point here. And of course, that goes all the way down into businesses. So if you're running a business, each person that you have in your business, honor them for the talents that they have, that they can contribute to your particular business. Or in a family, Same thing, the different family members can all participate in different ways. They don't all have to be good at the same thing. All right, now we're going to read number 5, God everywhere.
A man who realizes God will have to be realizing him throughout eternity. No power can make him forget him. Every portion of the universe is bristling with omniscience. To an ordinary man, this appears to be a dead, soulless universe. But that man who has the inner eye opened can see that this whole universe is palpitating with life because it is God's body. In India, nature is to us our mother, our father, our friend, and companion. We've been able to commune with this nature as our own mother, and so we boldly give out that the whole universe is living. Those poor Western thinkers think that when a nation is in a baby condition, it has a tendency to personify everything, just as a baby sees a leaf flying in the wind, takes it to be living, saying, "No, no, leaf, you must not move like that. Keep still." That is the reason why in the Vedic period they saw mountains, rivers, and other things as living entities. But this is a great blunder on their part. A baby is very pure. For that reason, it has some insight into the workings of nature. Paramahansa, a great soul, has also been compared to a baby. While a baby, through its ignorance, sees everything as living, the Paramahamsa sees everything as living through his wisdom.
That's sometimes that idea is called panentheism, where you see God in everything. And there's some aspects of Hinduism that could certainly be classified as that. And of course, we're supposed to be childlike, not childish. There's a difference. And so you have to be innocent and pure like the child. And this idea that the whole universe is living is actually the truth. And so if you try to keep that in mind, your today's imagination can be tomorrow's realization. The more you work at it and think of the universe as a living entity, the more it will be that to you. And eventually you'll have the inner awakening to that idea. And so again, nature really does embody everything that's conscious. Consciousness is everything. You know, from the Shakta Advaita standpoint and the Shaiva Advaita standpoint, God has become everything. And so in that's really the idea that we're presenting here, is that God has become everything. The Divine Mother is the universe, or Shiva has become the whole universe. The whole universe is endowed with consciousness. And so if everything is endowed with consciousness, well, why not see it that way? It's the nature of the universe to be filled with consciousness. Now, we don't normally think of inanimate things as having a consciousness. And yet, people that reach that state, like Sri Ramakrishna, and even some Western mystics, actually do perceive it that way. One Western mystic, after his experience, he said that everything was be-souled. That was the way he put it. Sri Ramakrishna said everything was like a pillow holding consciousness within. And so depending on your perspective and your upbringing and the kind of language that your religious teachings have been taught to you, the way the religion has been taught you, that's the way you begin to interpret these things. So some of you might remember John Dobson. He gave a talk at a conference once where his topic was matter as sentiency, which of course is just the opposite of the way most scientists see it. They see matter as inert. But after giving most of his talk, most of the audience, who were mostly scientists, didn't like his ideas. And so he said, I know. You all think you're very sophisticated beings and you know where down is. But if you really want to know where down is, you hang what you think of as an insentient piece of lead on what you think of as an insentient piece of string, and then you know exactly where down is. And his point was that matter really does have a consciousness. And in fact, I think I've pointed this out before, our 5 sense organs can only do the job that they do because the atoms themselves are able to respond to gravity, radiation, kinetic energy, electromagnetic energy, and electric energy and magnetic energy. If the atoms can respond to those 5 energies, you couldn't develop a sense organ that could respond to those energies. So each atom is responsive to these energies, and that's why we can develop sophisticated sense organs that respond to those 5 energies. And then we have what we call the sense of sight, or the sense of touch, or the sense of knowing where gravity is, or the sense of taste, or the sense of smell. All right, I think we have just one more paragraph here. All right.
Having thus found out that everywhere is God, the wise men have given this good news to people who have not the power to see God for themselves. But ordinary people cannot grasp this idea easily. It's too difficult for them. This idea of the Supreme Lord existing everywhere. So God has been broken up piecemeal, as it were, but not really broken up. As a man looking at you from the outside does not confound your eyes with your ears, or your ears with your nose, so this one God is broken up into many forms of deity, through which the ignorant man may reach the one God, and each one may choose that one which is best suited to him.
You could think of that as an analogy with some actor that you might like. And you might have seen them in several different movies, but not known that they were the same person. If you watch sci-fi, they probably have some grotesque mask on, or strange ears, or wrinkled skin, or green skin, or something. And if you're watching some movie where they're pretending to be another gender, then they've dressed up and trying to fool people because they've dressed up that way. And maybe they have another one where they're just dressed as an ordinary business person or somebody in the house. So they can take on all sorts of costumes, and if you've watched them for, say, 30 or 40 years, they're going to be a lot older in some movies and a lot younger in others. And so you might not even realize that it's the same person. And God is like that. So we have all these different deities that perform different functions because our ability to understand is fairly limited. We can't understand infinity. How do you understand infinity? You can't grab a hold of it. So for our minds to grab a hold of something, we divide God up into pieces so that we can personify it with different energies, with different powers, with different types of activities, or different types of benefits, or whatever. So different functions. And of course, the most common way to divvy it up is the creation, preservation, and destruction. So we have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, or we have Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Kali. So But there are lots of other deities as well. So a lot of times then they're pictured as perhaps members of a family. And so you have some members that are better at protecting and some members that are better at reworking things and recycling things and so forth. All right, so we've got the next one. Let's do 33 million gods. That might have been the population of India back when this was written. Of course, it's probably 330 million now, or maybe 3,330,000,000. All right.
Were those who wrote down the Vedas incarnations of God? They had realized God, and he who has realized God is the same as God himself. They were the embodiment of purity, and so they were able to perceive all truth. Is it because God has given his message once for all, and does not need to repeat it, that there are no such rishis today? God's always giving his message, but now there's no one to hear it. We're all like walls. Does any man talk to a dead wall? So God does not talk to us because we are filled with impurity and tamas, heaviness. But let this dead wall become living, and at once God will speak to it.
Of course, times change, and the message needs to change for the changing in times. So just as the way you teach a small child is different from the way you would teach an adult, the way you teach somebody in the 21st century is different from the way you would have done it in the 19th century or the 17th century or the 10th century or before the Common Era. All of these different times require some differences in the way you teach things. Also, of course, the analogies and metaphors suit the particular circumstances. No point in using metaphors and examples that the people you're talking to don't know what you're talking about. If you're using an example of something that they've never seen, it doesn't really help them understand something else that they've never seen, namely God. Although they're seeing God all the time, but they don't understand it. But so that's the beauty of getting a new incarnation, a new messenger of God being born at different times in order to speak to different people and in terms that they will understand. All right, so we can probably finish this section too. It's not very long, okay?
The life the sages lived in those days in their hermitages were very wonderful. These hermitages were in the most hidden nooks of the forest. There were large villages, perhaps 1,000 souls, and those who lived in them were all so wonderful that sometimes the little children were knowers of the self. They had no anxiety as regards food, for 1/6 of the king's revenue was always set apart for the maintenance of these people, and it was paid not in money, but in kind. So they were able to devote all their time to deep meditation. The wives were as great sages as their husbands. The young people were allowed simple enjoyments, but the life was very strict. Each had his or her fixed duties to perform. Their wants, however, were very few. When one of these sages came to a court, the king would at once come down from his throne and take the death-stained mendicant and place him on the throne. Then the king would sit at his feet to learn. Such was the great reverence they had for their sages.
Yeah, so that's unfortunately doesn't seem to be the tendency these days, but it's a nice model that we should probably be following more of. And I'm glad he brought out that there are many women seers in the Vedas as well. And so both genders are well represented in the lives of the various saints. And let's see, I guess I don't have anything else I need to say on that. Let's just continue here.
What is the difference between the rishis, who had realized God, and an incarnation of God? The rishis were incarnations of purity. They were sannyasins, those who had renounced everything for the sake of truth, and they preached renunciation to everyone. But when an incarnation comes, he recognizes that very few are fit to become sannyasins. So he preaches the householder's life to a householder, and out of 1,000 householders, he may perhaps choose sannyasins. He has the power to see what kind of life each man is fit to live. These divine teachers are living examples of truth, and to attain truth, we must sit at their feet.
And of course, any good teacher has to keep these things in mind. In order to be effective, you have to try to see where your students are and what their potentials are. And of course, a great spiritual soul is able to look into the depths of the student and to know exactly. As ordinary teachers, if we're teaching, say, in a school or something, we have to do the best we can in order to figure out exactly what the strengths and weaknesses of each student is and where they are best suited and how they can best learn, what kind of learning style they are best at, and so forth. But in the spiritual matter, these great souls can see what each student needs and act accordingly. All right, we'll continue here.
If you will study all the personal religions, you will find that they all preach renunciation. Renunciation is their fundamental teaching. Christ says, "Give up all and follow me." Mohammed says, "Allah is the one God, and you must worship him alone." Buddha says, "Give up all desires. That is the only way to salvation." Zoroaster says, "Renounce the principle of evil for Ahura Mazda, the principle of good." This is the whole theme of the Upanishads. You must renounce to attain freedom. All Vedanta is built on this principle of renunciation.
Yeah, so the idea is that attachments tend to bring along with it more worries and more difficulties, and also tend to increase more desires. So that's the difficulty. So the more desires you have, the more disturbed your mind is. And the more desires are thwarted, then it tends to make you upset or angry. And you see, the difficulty is the ego is an invention of Maya. And as an invention of Maya, it can't be fulfilled. Maya is, like running around in a maze of mirrors, and you keep thinking that something is good out there and that you can grab it, but then you just run into another mirror and you find it's not really there. And no matter where you go, all you're doing is facing a bunch of mirrors. And so the world is like that. You can't seem to get what you keep looking for, because the ego is part of this magic show that's not quite real or unreal. It's a strange mixture. And so it's not really satisfiable. You could say the world is made out of frustration. Even in the physics, you can see things are frustrating. Everything wants to fall together by gravity, but the charged particles don't want everything in one place. The electrons repel each other, and the protons repel each other. and everything would like to stay in one place, but then these other forces keep wanting to move them around. And the same thing with us. We'd like to obtain peace, love, and freedom, but the more you try to attain love, you find that your life is not as peaceful, and you don't have the freedom that you had before. And if you go for freedom, you may find you're kind of lonely. And so it goes on like that. You can analyze life like that and see just how we all want to get peace, love, and freedom. And all we do to get those three things, they tend to conflict with each other. And of course, the extremes are things like going for freedom and then having to fight wars over it. Well, that's not very peaceful. So that's our difficulty, is that seeking things in the world is inherently frustrating. And you have to go for God, as all of these things says. Go for whether it's Allah or whether it's thinking of Christ and his Father, or Ahura Mazda or Brahman. Doesn't really matter how you think of it, but that is the essence of what you need to strive for, because then you get the whole ball of wax. You get everything in one, and it's not frustrating. It's not like you have to meditate for peace and then do another meditation for love and another meditation for freedom. Once you get Brahman, all three are there. Brahman is Satchitananda. And you don't have to realize those three things separately. Once you've realized one of them, you've realized all three. All right, let's go on to the next paragraph.
The Vedas are not mere poetical imaginations. They represent the actual experience of the rishis, who merely wrote down what they themselves had seen. The Upanishads are the most wonderful books. One should learn Sanskrit merely in order to study them. They are a concise statement of all the great truths of the universe. Every line is the expression of a mind that has realized.
And that's the important thing about reading the Upanishads, is to you have to realize that these are realized souls writing these things down. They probably weren't originally written down. They were probably given orally to their students, who then memorized them and recited them and committed them to memory, and then got a family of people that would remember them and pass them on from one generation to the other. And then, of course, eventually they were written down. But they're very ancient. So this is the beauty. Now, of course, we're very lucky that, in a sense, we have a Ramakrishna and a Vivekananda Upanishad that was written down very much, a lot of it in English. M translated his gospel, part of his gospel, into English, and we have other great spiritual souls that translated into English, and much of what Vivekananda said was written in English, and I suspect much of what Ramakrishna also lectured some of it was also probably given in English, since he was lecturing in the South, and he was Bengali, so not sure how much of the other languages he knew, but he was very good at Sanskrit, and that would have been certainly the language of the elite. But he wasn't just lecturing to other pundits, he was lecturing to the general public. So he would probably have also used English as a medium. So we're very lucky that it was the English that managed to have an influence on India, not the French or somebody else. Otherwise, we'd be left out in the cold. All right, let's read the last paragraph.
In the West, they preach to masses of people, and that is what is understood as religion there. But in India, one man whispers one or two words in the ear of another in a solitary place, and this is religion according to the Hindus. Man receives religion through the mantra. The spiritual power is transmitted through the sacred word, and this must be made known to none. The wife must not tell it to the husband, or the husband to the wife. It is the person's individual property. So religion in India is altogether an individual thing. It is for this reason, Swami Vivekananda says, there must be as many religions as there are people. This is literally true. As one coat cannot fit both you and me, so one form of God cannot suit all. In the West, they give one God and expect him to suit everyone. But in India, every man is given the aspect of God fitted to his particular need. That is the meaning of the 33 million gods about which you hear. And it is the guru, or spiritual teacher, who determines what aspect of God is specially suited to the disciple.
You know, when you look at, say, Christianity, you find that there are many, many sects which are really the attempts to try to accommodate people with different temperaments. Of course, they don't usually think of it that way. They think that their way is better than all the other traditions. Well, it's better for somebody. It just doesn't necessarily mean it's better for everybody. And so the old sects continue, and they keep splintering. You get a lot of the traditional Christian churches end up with splitting into even more sects. You get the conservative sect and the more liberal sect and so forth. And you get, we have so many different kinds of Christianity. The United States was really founded on that principle of religious freedom, and we made the most of it. They started all sorts of interesting sects to suit different people's temperaments. But ultimately, no one will be satisfied with just a general type of religion. And so each person, even though they attend a particular sect of Christianity or tradition of Christianity, there are still probably things that they don't quite agree with and other things that they wish were a little different, but they know they have to kind of put up with it. It's the best fit that they can find. And there's some advantage to being in a group. You know, we can't all be so sure about our religious path that we can just go it alone. We need support. And so it's nice to have a community of at least more or less like believers. And of course, we even have that situation here as well. We have people coming from many different backgrounds. People that have immigrated from India, people that have Indian ancestry but were born here, and people that were born of other different ancestries. Los Angeles has probably more diverse ethnic communities than almost any place in the world. And so each of those, of course, is coming from a different cultural background with different ideas that appeal to them. And so you have a huge variety of people, especially in Los Angeles, in order to appeal to them. So each center does the best they can to be accommodating. And I've been at this center for virtually my entire life. And so I can tell you that there are some devotees, and these are all very good devotees, but some of them will only come to pujas. You don't see them at any lectures. Others only come to Ramnams. Some will only come to vigil. Some will only come to lectures. Some will only come to lectures when it's on Advaita. Some will only come to devotional lectures. And that's perfectly fine. We don't expect everybody to like absolutely everything that we do. We try to have a big enough variety that there's something that each person will find of value. And of course, we're especially blessed here at the Hollywood Center to have a collection of centers that are all coordinated. And so we have several swamis that give classes and talks And so you've got a variety of perspectives and styles to choose from, whereas most of the centers have one lecturing Swami, at most two, and so, if you don't like their style, you're kind of stuck. So feel very blessed here that you have a nice variety, and you're free to choose. We don't expect you to that you have to like everything that we do, but that because we're doing them for a variety of people. And speaking of variety, I'm thinking next Friday would be a good time to do another crystal bowl meditation session. So we'll do a short reading, and then we'll lead that right into the singing bowls again. And so we'll do that next Friday, because several people have mentioned that they really enjoyed that. So for those that enjoy that, we will be doing it again. And so stay tuned next Friday if you enjoyed the crystal bowls. All right, let's close with a chant, and then we'll see you next week, hopefully. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace.